Thank you for watching, liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing right now. Hello world, I'm Chris Pirillo, and you're watching another episode of CPU, which is short for Chris Pirillo. You decide what the U is short for because you are the only U I care about. Generally speaking, I don't do a lot of product reviews because I'm not really a reviewer. I'm a user, and I'm using the definition of user that they use in Tron, the movie, which I hope you've seen by now. I have experiences with stuff, and I love sharing my experiences with you. However, in doing this review, we're trying something new. Instead of just guessing what you might want to hear about in my Surface Pro 3 review, I asked you what you'd want to hear about, and you responded. So, this is your review, for you, by me, together! Stuart Hayden asks, I'd like your take on how well the Surface Pro 3 works with other devices, as that, in my opinion, is one of the biggest selling points of devices nowadays. That's a great question. You know I've long said that it's not just about that one device, but how that one device interoperates with other devices in an archipelago of experiences. And while Microsoft is tiptoeing towards a comprehensive plan at sewing together hardware and software and services cross-platform, it's not quite there yet, and I can't really say that the Surface Pro 3 really plays a crucial role in the entire ecosystem that Microsoft's trying to provide. Does it work with other devices? Well, sure, if those devices connect by way of Bluetooth, they're on the network, but in terms of this interoperating with something else that I couldn't necessarily do with another device, not so much. The Surface Pro 3 stands well enough alone, which is definitely a good thing. But it's also not necessarily a good thing if you're expecting this to be a complement to other Microsoft devices and products that you might have in your life. Or to put it to you another way, and to spin it in a positive fashion, there's nothing that the Surface Pro 3 does that other products couldn't necessarily do in relation to giving you a comprehensive experience that Microsoft might want to provide. Remember, Microsoft is creeping towards cross-platform compatibility. That's good. Sensei asks, can you please review how reliable it is as a processing laptop replacement for a person in a master's program in history that involves lots of word processing and presentation in various media sources? I think it's ample. This is beyond a laptop replacement. It's a laptop replacement and a tablet replacement all in one. That's one of the bonuses, or benefits I should say, in getting a Surface Pro tablet, or computer, or laptop, or whatever you want it to be. Word processing? Check. Presentations? Check. Media sources? Check. It's good. Then again, I think you'd be equally as well served with those tools by earlier Surface Pro computers. But if you want something faster, with a different screen resolution, that's when you'd want to go with the Surface Pro 3. And yes, in terms of my experience with the Surface Pro and the Surface Pro 2, I would say that the Surface Pro 3 is not just the latest, but out of those three, the greatest. Ritar Ori Christensen asks, I would like to hear how your experience is with battery life on the Surface Pro, and how does it cope with performance-intensive apps such as Photoshop? Not to surprise you or anything, but I don't use Photoshop. I don't need to use Photoshop. There's nothing I need in Photoshop. I don't use a lot of Adobe software. But I can tell you this, the Surface Pro 3 battery life has been ample. Which is to say, I'd be pretty confident to be able to use the Surface Pro 3 throughout the day without having to recharge it. Granted, that's not when I'm running processor and memory-intensive applications like Photoshop. Eking out desktop performance in these types of computers is not really going to happen anytime soon. But that does not mean that you couldn't run Photoshop. Just expect that it's probably going to drain your battery faster than if you were, say, just, doing word processing and stuff. Hey, stop beeping. This video's about the Surface Pro 3, not you. Sorry, sometimes I have to put my devices in their place. T. Smith GB writes, I used to have a Windows laptop for work and pleasure, then moved to a MacBook Air, which is coming to the end of its life. I would like to better understand if this would be a suitable replacement as a business tool, general operations stuff, but also for use on the road. I use my tablet mainly for light web browsing and social browsing, so how it compares to an iPad as a light media device also. Yes, I would say that the Surface Pro 3 could handle all of those tasks with flying colors. It really boils down to what you prefer. I mean, in terms of an operating system or a platform, because you're talking about three here, OS X, iOS, or Windows. What are you most comfortable with? More importantly, is there a particular program or app on one platform that's not on another? Make no mistake, this is a very powerful computer, and it's also a very powerful tablet. And I know, a tablet is every bit a computer as a regular computer, because it's a computer, right? It depends on what you want to use it for. Why would you want to use a Surface Pro 3 over an iPad? that's completely up to you. The prime advantage is that you'd be using Windows, and if you are familiar with Windows, that might make the best choice for you. For the most part, as far as the average consumer is concerned, you could do just about anything on anything these days. That's good. Apart from the use of Windows, I think you have two features that stand out in the Surface Pro 3. One is the built-in kickstand, and two is a keyboard that's detachable. The keyboard is easily reattached, and they work seamlessly together. So Fruity3 asks, talk about what the product is. In a sense, don't try to bash it as an inferior tablet and laptop, rather talk about how it performs in its own categories. I don't think I've bashed a Surface Pro before, so I didn't plan on doing it in this review either. I think that as far as a category is concerned, though, it's really a laptop replacement and a tablet replacement at the same time. It's one of the better Windows PCs that you could buy today. I think Microsoft is facing some stiff competition in the marketplace, which is good. You want competition. But unfortunately, they seem to be competing with their partners, not just their competitors. What Microsoft has going with the Surface Pro 3 above all others is that Microsoft makes the operating system, and they also manufacture the hardware. They pretty much own the experience. It's a tablet in the sense that you can touch the screen, but it's also a laptop in the sense that you could work on it like a traditional computer. I know I'm repeating myself, but it's very important. A tablet is a computer. It's just a different type of computer. A tablet has hardware, an operating system, and software. That's a computer. Without the keyboard, the Surface is a tablet. And with the keyboard, it's more like a laptop. But I can tell you, it is not an inferior tablet, nor is it an inferior laptop. It's just different. It's kind of in between everything. And maybe that's its biggest problem. If it has a perceived problem, I don't know if people want it. And I'm not the one just saying that people don't want it. It's just that I really don't know if Microsoft sold a lot of Surface Pros in the past, specifically in relation to their partners and competitors. Leonardo Lopez asks, do you think the Surface Pro could completely replace a regular laptop in terms of its usability and system demands? How do you think it stacks up against the MacBook Air 13-inch? This is kind of a loaded question, and I hope it doesn't get me in trouble, but they're two completely different kinds of devices that can help you do similar things. In my experience, yes, I do believe it can replace a regular laptop. In terms of usability, well, that kind of boils down to operating system support, and you kind of know how I feel about Windows 8.1. The TLDR version, in my perspective of Windows 8.1, is that it doesn't really know what it wants to be. A desktop OS, a tablet OS, or something in between. And unfortunately, the user might get confused. Which isn't to say that everyone's confused, because obviously some people love it. So how does it stack up against the MacBook Air? Well, the Surface Pro 3 has a touchscreen, the Mac does not. Apple makes the MacBook Air, and Microsoft makes the Surface Pro, so one runs Windows natively, and the other one runs OS X or Windows natively. I think what it boils down to is, do you have another Apple product or another Microsoft product in your life that might interoperate better with what Microsoft or Apple is providing? Which is to say, a MacBook Air is not as powerful if you're not really living inside of Apple's ecosystem. Then again, on an increasing basis, a lot of Microsoft's software is going cross-platform, or on the web. I think it boils down to what kind of support options you want. Or maybe you like one design better than the other. Do you want a detachable keyboard? Well, then the Surface Pro 3 is the choice for you. Do you want a touchscreen PC? Go with the Surface Pro 3. I think it stacks up well against the MacBook Air 13-inch, but it's not necessarily a direct competitor. Christopher Ramatar asks, how the Surface Pro 3 really stacks up to the MacBook Air, not how the commercials are, but a realistic review. I think I pretty much just covered that, but it's good to know that everybody's head's in the same place. The biggest difference between the MacBook Air 13-inch and the Surface Pro 3 in relation to hardware is the touchscreen on the Surface Pro 3, because obviously OS X was not optimized for touchscreens. Yes, you could potentially run your legacy Windows software on a Surface Pro 3, but you could also do the same thing on a MacBook Air, natively, either through Boot Camp or through some kind of virtual machine utility like Parallels. And obviously there are other differences, including operating system, but with that operating system comes a bevy of services that you may or may not be able to take advantage of. As far as a dedicated Windows PC is concerned, again, the Surface Pro 3 is about the best one I've come across. But I still don't know if I really want to use a Windows PC as a tablet. There's too much cruft involved. Daniel Garten6993 asks, how well does it perform with processor-intensive programs? That's a good question. I felt it responded as well as it could have responded. Could a faster computer respond better? Sure. But please, if you're asking me to perform synthetic benchmarks, I'm not the guy for you. In my experience, with what I threw at my Surface Pro 3, not physically, I mean on the machine, doing things and multitasking, doing more than one thing at a time, I thought it kept up rather nicely. Quotidian Light asks, after falling in love with my little tablet, I'm considering a Surface as my primary machine. I want to see how it handles Adobe software. I understand it can handle a whole suite, but I wonder if it slows or gets hot. I'm also interested in video and audio processing for YouTube videos and podcasts. Does it overheat during Netflix movies? How does it handle Skype if you are recording the video and audio? Will it choke? Stuff like that. Even though I'm not really the kind of guy to watch a movie, record a Skype conversation, and process or encode video at the same time, I don't know if I'd necessarily want to do that in the first place. This Surface Pro 3 is powered by an Intel Core i5 with 4 gigs of RAM, and I thought it worked rather well. I may not have done everything that you intend on doing, but you gotta remember that if you want it to do a lot, you gotta put a lot into the machine. So spec it out. Top out the memory. Max out the CPU. Buy as much as you can afford. I can't think of a time that it choked in the middle of a task on me. At least in relation to times that other PCs have choked on me. Mindo asks, I want you to really nitpick on the fluid or smoothness of the device when doing normal tasks, UI transitions, etc. You might know how picky I am when it comes to UI responsiveness, and Windows 8.1 on a Surface Pro 3 works quite well. In relation to general navigation around the OS, I found that I didn't really experience any jitteriness. I might have said this before, but if I hadn't, Microsoft has done a really good job at making sure the UI is fluid on Windows 8 computers. So, no complaints in the UI transitions department. David Rhodes asks, is the pen conducive to photo editing with programs such as Photoshop and GIMP? Wow. Am I the only one who doesn't use Photoshop? I've never really been someone who's been inclined to use a stylus or a pen. So I'm sure it would work if you need it to work, but in relation to usability, you'd probably want to turn to someone who does a lot of artwork with a Surface Pro 3, or at least has tested it. That's not me. I haven't done everything, I can't do everything. I'm just being honest with you. If I were to do any kind of photo editing, this would probably frustrate me because I'm just not that kind of user. I'd be more inclined to grab a mouse or use a touchpad, which, as you can see, is built right into the keyboard. Though I might add, the keyboard is a separate purchase from the Surface Pro 3. The argument could be made that you'd rather use a pen for note-taking. That's fine, so long as the app is optimized for a pen or a stylus. But at that point, I can't really say that the Surface Pro 3 itself has an advantage, because you could use a capacitive stylus with a tablet that was made by another company. So the stylus itself is not really an advantage of the Surface Pro 3. Sorry, Microsoft. Yes, you could use this pen on a Surface Pro 3. You can attach it to the keyboard like that and carry it around with you, but you could also, again, use the capacitive stylus on the Surface Pro 3 or any other tablet. So again, then you have to ask, what is the advantage of this with this? And I just don't see it. Luke Knudsen asks, clamshell versus kickstand. Can I use it on a bus, subway? If you wanted to. Sure. Adding the keyboard adds a little bit of thickness, but not that much more. There are several advantages to having this kind of keyboard. 1, it acts as a screen protector. 2, it can be removed if you don't need the screen protector or a keyboard and you're looking to save space. It feels hefty for one hand, but rather comfortable in two. But I don't know if I'd necessarily want to hold on to the Surface Pro 3 for too long. It gets heavy. And it's not to say that the weight changes. I'm just saying that it's got some weight to it. Is it a good bus or subway computer? I don't know if I've ever been asked that question, but I'd say, yeah. Cactus Tweeter asks, Surface Pro 3 does good as a laptop, but how does it really do as a tablet? It seems way too thick and way too heavy to use for any length of time. How are the touch-based applications? Can you use the touch version of Word and Excel? There are a few apps that you could use, but I would say that the best touch-optimized version of Office today is on iOS. And remember, if it starts getting heavy for you, just flip out the kickstand and set her down. Microsoft, much like other leading vendors, brags about how many apps might be available in their store. Unfortunately, you really don't care if there are millions and millions of apps. You only want to use 1 or 2. And I just don't know what you specifically want to use on this that you couldn't necessarily use on other platforms, which you may or may not already have. I'll give Microsoft this. They have some of the best default touch applications on any tablet platform that I've seen to date. You really run into a lot of issues when you're trying to touch an application that wasn't necessarily optimized for touch, and there's really no way of telling on the screen whether or not something was optimized for touch. Enter a frustration that I'm not going to get into because I've talked about it how many times before. If you have no problem with the way that Microsoft is handling things inside of Windows 8.1, then there's no problem. Brandon Baker asks, who do you feel this device is for? How is it as a tablet, as a laptop, and as a desktop replacement? This is for someone who is familiar with Windows, wants a touchscreen experience, but still wants that legacy desktop experience on their lap. Wow. I think I just answered all your questions, Brandon. Mark Anthony asks, I use mostly Google apps, but I love the Surface tablets, even the phones. If Windows had all apps I use on Android, I would gladly give up Android. In my case, would it make sense to get a Windows tablet? That's a toughie. What does Windows give you that Google can't? That's the question you have to answer. Because, and this should go without saying, you can get to pretty much everything that Google offers you from pretty much anything. If you're being served by Google and Android amply, well, then there's really no reason to get a Windows tablet. Unless you're telling me that there's something you believe Windows can do that Android can't. But as you said, if Windows had all apps I use on Android, I would gladly give up Android. I don't think the product would be for you. And the product doesn't have to be for everybody to be a good product. It's a good Windows PC. And hopefully this was a decent review, enough for you to like and share this video. Thank you again for subscribing. Thank you for interacting. You really made this review the review that it was, asking me for my experience, knowing full well that everybody out there has likely had a completely different experience. I appreciate the time